Hello and welcome to Apex Instant Tips, episode 117, brought to you every Friday at about 12:05 Eastern Time. I'm Anton. We have with us today a special guest, Hayden. Hi, Hayden.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Yes, I'm glad it's the end of the week, even though I've done almost nothing this week, except for sleep. I got my first case of COVID on Sunday, and really, this is my first thing back.
Well, you were in the rare few for not having had COVID before.
Yeah, and I got it maybe 48 hours before my wife tested positive. I tested positive, so I suspect we got it at the same time, or I gave it to her. But anyway, as folks know, we have just 5 minutes to give a tip. I do have a little topic to spring on you afterwards, Hayden. So if people want to stick around, my question is just a brief discussion on the making of a 5-minute tip. So we'll talk about that after you tell us what our 5 minutes really is about today.
Yes, well, our Twitter followers or X followers, whatever, will know that today's topic is meta search configurations. So we're going to propose a utility for leveraging this new, I want to say Apex 22.2 feature. And I think it's a must-have for any application.
Yeah, and it's funny because we don't usually do new feature tips. We try to focus on different ways to use things, and so and I think this falls into that category because a lot of folks at this point probably have done search configurations, but mostly the way I've seen search configurations used are to search your data. You search your customer data, you give a link to your customer page. You search your product data, you give a link to your product page, and it's about doing that. And
that's for the whole tip, Anton.
I'm stopping right there. I'm going to say that's what people usually do, but we're going to take it one step farther. And I think
we are going to start with your opening premise there. So without further ado, why don't we share my screen?
Okay. Great.
And so here I have an application, and I want to empower a user of this application to navigate the customer's data. So
you want to go get to Michelle Scameni without having to get to that page first.
Precisely. So I have already created a search configuration. I didn't want to waste time creating it live, called customers. And this scans the EBA customers view. It's like a regular view. And it allows me to search the customer name field in that view. It'll display the customer name when I search for it, and it'll redirect me to page 50, which is the customer page, and it'll set the P50 ID with the ampersand ID column from my view. So now that I have this, how do I expose it in my application? Let's say I want to make it available everywhere. I'm going to go to page 0. And let's say I want something in the title bar. So I'm going to create a new region, ignore the currently commented out region. And I'm going to call this search config. And it's going to have a type of search, you guessed it.
Excellent.
And it's going to have a template of, let's say, title bar. Mm-hmm. And immediately it creates something called a search source. And it gives me a selection of the source sources that I've configured. And you think I'd just be able to save at this point, but I can't. This is, I think, a little bit of an experiential bug.
I've had this same problem many times, and each time I'm like, what did I forget?
Yeah, there's no help to tell you what you've missed. So let me tell you what you've missed. You need to create a page item that is the search field. And then you need to navigate to the attributes of your search region, and then you need to associate it with your search field.
Excellent.
And I'm going to call this customers. So what does this look like? Yeah, so now I've got the search field, and I can search for Michelle, and it pops up Michelle's community. So, and then I can click on it to then navigate to her page.
Super ugly.
It's hideous, yeah. So let's doll this up a little bit. I'm going to change, I'm going to start by changing the template to optional floating. And then I think the real issue is that it disrupts the header bar here. So I think there are many solutions to this. A solution that I'm going to recommend is let's move this to drawers and pop-ups, change the template to inline drawer. I'm going to uncomment this region up here, which I created earlier. And in this region, I've got a search field, which all it does is upon detecting a click, and actually you suggested I change this to enter, mouse enter.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Upon a mouse enter, it will
open that region. Okay, great.
For some reason, it's not displaying. I guess I have to create the action. Whatever, I'll just create it.
I wonder if it's because we changed the type.
Anyway.
Anyway.
And now it's going to
open
the region. And the region is called search config.
All right, so let's show that really quickly. We've only got a minute left, and we've got a few things we want to show. So
yes. So when I enter the mouse, this immediately pops up a mouse enter, and now I can type Michelle and navigate the same way. So as you pointed out, Anton, there's more that we want to show. This is like 101. Let's step it up a little bit. Let's add a new, so the opportunity with search configurations is layering searches on top of each other. I'm going to speed through this, but we will share all of the code behind this. Let's actually expose the navigation menu to allow people to search through the navigation menu. Oops, that didn't work.
So we've got a query and this query queries the metadata of the navigation menu.
Yes, and I apologize, we will go over time.
We're going to be way over today, I'm afraid.
And in this navigation menu, the primary key is the list entry. It's the entry text, and we're almost done. And we'll also discuss the query in just a minute. Let's. Yes, so it's going to show the entry text, and then the link type is going to be redirectory URL, and I'm going to reference the entry URL, which is a field in my query. And now back on page 0, I'm going to create a new search source called nav menu. And now when I come here, I can search for a dashboard and navigate to the dashboard.
Right, and if you had a user named, customer named Dash, it would also find the customer. So it integrates these things.
That's right. So let's briefly discuss the query that I've exposed in a gist, and then we will link to under the video. It's querying, yes. Querying the APEX metadata, as you had mentioned before, Anton. And beyond that is doing a couple of tricky things. First off, you'll notice it actually has a dependency on a package that you may not have yet, but we have discussed. And where can people find this package, Anton?
That is on my blog, apexdebug.com. It's making the most of a navigation menu. And again, this is a navigation menu, and it's very similar to the other queries that you'll have seen here. And it allows, because this returns a Boolean, it really is just a wrapper around an Apex function that returns a Boolean. So we returned it so we can use it in SQL.
Absolutely. And can you comment on this that we've done up here?
This is a key element, and this is a tip within the tip. So maybe we should get our extra 5 minutes because it's really a second tip. But Apex plugin util replace substitutions will take a string and replace anything like ampersand p15 underscore name dot with the actual value. And within a navigation menu, you have ampersand app ID dot, ampersand page ID dot. You have a whole bunch of you have session, ampersand session dot. You have a whole bunch of substitutions that need to get substituted for this to work. And that's a key element for using a view. Global search configurations allow you to define, actually just say use this list. We could have just said use the nav menu list, but then it doesn't actually do the substitutions on these things if you do it that way. So this is the way to get around that. It would be great if you could just use the list natively. I don't know why it doesn't let you, but this does the substitutions for you.
Yeah, so a necessary little trick to get this to work. But otherwise, I hope people will appreciate that this query is ultimately pretty simple. So
pretty simple. But I'm going to point something else out. And this is the thing that really kills me about having to do this in lines 4 and 5. Apex does, in fact, do an Apex prepare URL, Apex util prepare URL on this value. So they're doing the prepare URL. So if this is a modal, no problem. It's going to open the modal. But if they don't do the substitution replacement. So here you go. This is the way to do it.
So we've gone way over time. Let's stop sharing screens.
Right.
And if anyone has any questions, there's an easy way to do that. Just create a search page with wizard and an entry to.
That's right. There is a wizard for adding a search page, but then, so this is an interesting thing. And so, Danielle, this is great because this is sort of the topic that Hayden, that I was alluding to as a post tip topic. And that's what goes into making a 5-minute tip. All right. And we had a long discussion about, should this be a region on page 0, in the dialogue, or should this be a separate dialogue page? If you do what Daniel just suggested, super easy, you'll end up with another page. And that page you'll reference that page, and instead of having a dialogue region, you'll have a dialogue page. Is one or the other better? Not necessarily, right?
I do like Hangel's suggestion. I'm very pro in general doing anything declaratively, and so the fact that there is a wizard that allows you to create this is definitely a plus.
Well, it will create the dialogue page, but you still have to do all the search configurations. You have to create your search configuration and those kinds of things. So that said, the nice thing about doing a dialogue region is they do render faster, and there's a little bit less back and forth to the server. But it's these kinds of discussions that we go through trying to decide, well, what makes it into the 5 minutes? Do we talk about, decided to make it a dialogue footer, and the reason was, all of these back things, or do we have to skip through it because it's only 5 minutes?
Because I was in the driver's seat, I forced the decision in the direction of the inline dialogue.
Well, I think Daniel's right? There's a lot less configuration, no need to manually create search items, regions. This is true.
That's very true. I guess in my defense, I thought that the inline dialogue felt less lightweight, felt more lightweight than an entirely new page.
Right, and I think there's these are discussion points that we go through in trying to decide, okay, how to make it 5 minutes. But the other thing we end up researching is, okay, if you do it as a dialogue page, obviously it doesn't have to run the queries each time. Whereas if you do it on a page 0, does it or doesn't it? So we spent time to research to make sure, in fact, if you just use the basic setups, you're not going to be running your search query every time you're on the page. It turns out it really only runs after you pop the dialogue and type something in. So we did some checking there. So it does become 5 minutes of a tip is a whole bunch of gnashing of teeth to decide what makes it into the tip. Does this tip have any side effects? One of the things that I noticed was the use of the search item at the top that doesn't actually do anything. You essentially never type into that search item in the title bar. It always just opens another page.
Yeah.
But it turns out that's very similar to what happens in the Apex Builder. If you click in the search at the top right of the Apex Builder, you never type in there. It opens a dialog modal that has a search in it. So it has a very similar look to the actual builder. So these are things that, things that we ponder.
And as we have discussed in previous episodes, we are both very influenced by the UX standards set by the builder.
That's right. So, if I had to recap this particular tip, my feelings on what this tip really is about is less about search configurations and how to build the things, but more about search configurations can use metadata, right, of the application itself, which I think is a novel, not unique. Other folks are doing it, I'm sure, but it's an approach a lot of folks might not consider, is that you have the opportunity to query your own metadata. You can query either the nav menu itself, which is what we did. You can query pages. You can query static regions to navigate to all of this content within your application. And then the second tip within the tip is the Apex plugin util.replace substitutions, which is excellent.
Yes, I am very glad to know about that utility.
Yeah, and I'll say all of this sparked a sidebar conversation about that utility itself and its use with markdown text and other things. So perhaps we'll get another tip out of that. Hayden, I've chatted along way past a 5-minute tip at this point. People have wasted a perfectly good 17 minutes.
I'm sure all of our viewers have checked out by now.
yes, I'm sure. We're down to just you and me having a conversation. So that said, why don't we take our conversation offline and we'll let folks get back to lunch?
Yes. Thanks for anyone who stuck around, and have a good weekend.
Bye-bye, everyone.